Escape from New York. It's one of John Carpenter's best films. It's also an all-time iconic action film. It's one of my favorite movies ever, and it's a cyberpunk masterpiece. But why are we talking about it?
No reason. I just like doing things like that.
Well, that is true, but also because we like to keep what I call the Mediaverse connected around here. And the Escape franchise is one that has strange strands that branch to books, comics, a film sequel, and even video games. Basically, the Escape franchise is its own Mediaverse. And I want to talk about what made this first film so good and explore its various adaptations throughout the years.
Please, Snake, just stop them. Why should I? Because you're the only one who can.
Oh yeah, and there's that. But this is a time-sensitive mission, so let's move out. Let's start by giving the basic back of the DVD synopsis for those unfamiliar with Escape from New York. And yes, I will be using my movie trailer voice. In the near future of 1997, the US has become overrun by crime. As a solution, the government converts New York's Manhattan Island into a walled maximum security prison for the whole country. Once you go in, you don't come out. When Air Force One is hijacked by terrorists and crashes into the prison city, the president is taken hostage. Ex-Special Forces renowned outlaw and federal prisoner Snake Plissken is coerced into rescuing the president from the island of the damned and given only 24 hours to complete the task, or else he dies. But with the president's captors after him and danger lurking around every corner of the city, will Snake be able to escape from New York? Yeah, so, honest trailers. Hit me up if you want a vacation and need a movie guy voice to fill in.
Sorry.
Getting back on track, the premise is one of the things I love about Escape from New York, mainly because it's straightforward and simple. I honestly think some of the best action movies tend to have basic, streamlined plots. There's really only two things we need to know for an action movie. What's the danger, and is my main protagonist a badass? Escape from New York keeps it simple. What's the danger? If Snake doesn't save the president, he dies in 24 hours. Is Snake a badass? Yes. Commence series of events. I don't mean to simplify the film so much, but the plot is not the meat of this movie. It's the aesthetics, vibe, and ambiance within the frames that has solidified it as a classic, and that's the colossal achievement of its vaunted director, John Carpenter. Some may only know John Carpenter for his creation of iconic horror character Michael Myers in Halloween. Many know him for directing numerous action sci-fi classics like The Thing, They Live, Big Trouble in Little China, Assault on Precinct 13, and of course, Escape from New York and LA. But we're here to talk about New York first.
The accent was clearly from Brooklyn.
And Escape from New York has all the things that make a John Carpenter movie a John Carpenter movie. A kind of cheesy, ultra macho main character, unsettling atmospheres, well-paced action, and a heavy use of tension and suspense as opposed to over-the-top gore or jump scares. Oh, yeah, I guess I forgot about that one. Well, at least when he does throw over-the-top gore in there, he goes all the way. What's most interesting is how almost all of Carpenter's films include these elements while still each being individually unique. I mentioned in the beginning that Escape from New York is a great cyberpunk film, not just in its aesthetics, but its social commentary. And this is not something foreign to Carpenter. His 1988 film They Live is hailed as one of the most pertinent cyberpunk films as it explored the effects of commercialism and the way people are manipulated by advertising. I wouldn't deem Assault on Precinct 13 a cyberpunk film, but it does still hold social commentary with a lens on racial equality and blood brotherhood. And Escape from New York would be Carpenter's cynical, anti-authority film. He wrote the script in 1976 in the aftermath of Nixon's Watergate scandal, and even Carpenter states the whole feeling of the nation was one of real cynicism about the president.
President of what? That's not funny, Pliskin.
Which is why Snake's dismissive, de-gaff attitude resonated with audiences so much at the time, and honestly, it still resonates today. But Escape from New York also was made at the perfect time. In 1981, the year Escape came out, the US prison population grew by almost 40,000, which was the largest increase in a single year since data became available in 1925. Basically, a dystopic vision of Manhattan Island as a giant walled prison wasn't the craziest idea to come up with for a movie. So yes, Escape from New York is great cyberpunk, but we all know movies are usually only as good as the sum of their parts. Carpenter has always had a keen eye for who and how he casts his films, and Escape from New York was no different. I'd be hard-pressed to think of a John Carpenter movie with a bad cast, but Escape from New York stands out as having actually one of the more recognizable casts of his films, starting with lead actor Kurt Russell, who, before Escape from New York, had plenty of acting roles, but none that really displayed his toughness and machismo. But he changed that perception with his first turn as Snake Plissken. Russell's extremely entertaining as the charismatic, smart-aleck, tough-as-nails outlaw, and it would be a role that solidified him as a legit Hollywood action star for the next 20 years. It was also his first, but certainly not last time working with Carpenter, as he'd star in the director's future films The Thing, Big Trouble in Little China, and of course, Escape from LA. Starring alongside Russell is Lee Van Cleef, who most will know as Angel Eyes from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Also, if you've never seen The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, turn this video off immediately and go watch it because it's just amazing. Oh yeah, and he was also in Paint Your Wagon.
Gonna paint our wagon, gonna paint it good. We ain't bragging, we're gonna coat that wood.
But I digress. Van Cleef acts as the prison warden and Plisken's mission commander, Sergeant Houck. He's a no-nonsense kind of guy who only cares about Snake completing his mission and nothing else.
Coming out.
Plisken, if you get back in that glider, I'll shoot you down. You climb out, I'll burn you off the wall. Do you understand that, Plisken?
Little human compassion.
It's not just Van Cleef on his own that's great, it's really the chemistry between him and Russell, because their back and forth are probably the best dialogue in this film.
I'm not a fool, Plisken.
Call me Snake.
As for the villains of this movie, they're seldom seen, but when they're on screen, they steal the show. And those would be Isaac Hayes and Frank Doubleday. Although everyone should know Isaac Hayes for being a great musician, most know him simply as Chef.
Hello there, children.
Hey, Chef.
He plays one of the cooler and more bizarre villains around as the Duke of New York, a bad man whose reputation precedes him and whom you do not cross.
What did I teach you?
You are the Duke of New York. You're a number one.
And at his right hand is the strangest henchman of all time, in my opinion, who we did not get enough of. Frank Doubleday, who is a John Carpenter regular, as Romero. Is he a vampire? I don't know, but does it really matter when your mannerisms are providing this kind of entertainment? It's a weird but committed performance, and you know what? It actually fits how crazy the inmates are supposed to be on the island due to being exposed to chemicals over the years. But rounding out the cast as Snake's crew of misfits are Harry Dean Stanton, playing the brilliant strategist and former partner of Snake known as Brain, Adrienne Barbeau as Maggie, who's not only Brain's bodyguard but his lover, and then there's Ernest Borgnine as Cabby, an eccentric and extremely upbeat cab driver with great timing who just wants to tag along for the ride. Aside from each character having their own defining moment in the film, everyone's relatively likable and the actors all give flat-out good performances, including Donald Pleasance as the President, who you probably know from Carpenter's 1978 Halloween as Dr. Loomis. Although he's only in Escape from New York for about 10 minutes, he displays a wide range of emotions in his sparse screen time, culminating in a truly what-the-fuck moment in the film. So a good premise, a great director, a phenomenal cast, and a military cyberpunk aesthetic. Everything is clicking so far. But there's another element that puts this film over the top, and that would be its soundtrack. Now, it's rare I talk about a director in two different sections of an analysis, but how often is the director also the film's soundtrack composer and musician? Can you say multi-talented? John Carpenter has performed the soundtrack for almost all of his films, even Escape from LA, which surprised me because that soundtrack is actually kind of terrible. New York, on the other hand, is a great dark synth soundtrack through and through. Most of Carpenter's songs have a simple metronome beat mixed with some really good eerie synth tones. And I find myself playing Carpenter songs from Escape from New York, The Thing, or Assault on Precinct 13 in the background when I'm just playing action or horror video games, because it goes along so perfectly. But with everything I've laid out about the pieces that came together to produce this film and how good it all turned out, it's no surprise that there would end up being a considerable amount of spin-off media. Not many people know there was a paperback book of Escape from New York written by Mike McQuarrie, which actually came out after the movie. It's one of the few times I've read a book whose premise was based off a screenplay. The book follows the movie pretty much beat for beat, but gives you a little glimpse of Snake when he was in the war and how he lost his eye, the robbery that led to him getting arrested, and there's one cool tidbit in the book I do wish they had added to the film. In the book, Houck has a son who's in the prison, and he asks Snake to just see if he's alive, and that he'll recognize him because he has Houck tattooed on his fingers. When the sewer crazies attack Snake and he barricades the window, a crazy reaches in and he shoots off the guy's hand, and when he looks down, he sees the name Houck tattooed on the fingers. It's a very small bit, but adds a lot more to Houck's character and his motivations in the story. The best way I could describe the book is it's like reading the movie with a couple of deleted scenes, which isn't bad, but I'd rather watch it than read it. From this point though, the franchise went dark for 15 years until 1996, when it was time for Snake to make his comeback on the left coast, and it gave us one of the best campy sequels ever, Escape from LA. Escape from LA is probably one of my favorite bad action movies, and I'm almost shocked it was directed by Carpenter, as the tone is much more campy. It almost feels like Big Trouble in Little China meets Escape from New York. And it seems like it's actually a satire of the original film. Apparently Carpenter got Russell to help co-write the script for LA with him, and from what I've read, it seems LA was their big budget effort where they were going to have the freedom to do any and everything they wanted with the escape plot and Pliskin's character. Take this clip for example, which may be the pinnacle of 90s cheese, but also is a good summation of what Escape from LA is like. Snake Plissken surfing on a tsunami with the worst green screen behind him, then going airborne and jumping into a speeding car. It's beautiful, honestly. There's a few more ridiculous set pieces like this throughout the film, but these almost meme-worthy moments are what make Escape from LA so cheesily awesome and memorable. Even to this day, if I want a good over-the-top cheesy action flick though, Escape from LA is on my short list of go-to movies. Now, somehow, despite a book, a 90s sequel, and a comic adaptation that would come in 1987, I'm surprised that during that time period, the only merch and media area Escape from New York and LA didn't cross into was action figures. And it was pretty common back in the late 80s and through the 90s to have rated R movies that released action figures. I remember having action figures from the Terminator and even Demolition Man. Yes, Demolition Man had action figures. And yet somehow Snake Plissken was left out of the action figure game. And even weirder, there was an Escape from New York board game. Yes, this is real. And I kinda want it. But let's move on from my disappointment of a childhood minus Snake Plissken merchandise and move on to even lesser known subsistence of the Escape franchise, the comics. Sadly, Escape from LA would be the last time we'd see Snake Plissken on screen, but the film did open up an intriguing storyline that would be addressed through comic adaptation, an interlude of sorts depicting the events between New York and LA. Now, throughout Escape from LA, Snake is told from multiple people,
"Heard they busted your hump pretty good down in Cleveland."
So it begged the question, what happened in Cleveland? And this is where the comics would come in, but even this would take some time. The first of these efforts was a one-shot in 1997 titled The Adventures of Snake Plissken, which I actually did an entire video about that you can check out if you're interested. The most disappointing thing though was the comics still did not say what happened in Cleveland. In fact, that issue actually ended with Snake leaving for Cleveland. Then in 2003, CrossGen released a 4-part miniseries titled The Snake Plissken Chronicles. This plot had Snake getting into mischief in Atlantic City, but still, nothing to do with Cleveland. It wouldn't be until 2014 when Boom Comics would put out a 16-volume series that Cleveland exposition would finally be brought to light. Bear in mind that only issues 13 through 16 are about Cleveland, being preceded by chapters like Escape from Florida, Escape from Siberia, and Escape to New York? Finally, it's Escape from Cleveland, but I haven't had the opportunity to read anything past the original one-shot, but there is a plot synopsis on the Cleveland arc. Snake Plissken has gone into retirement, living on a small farm in Cleveland, but when the US government forces him to once again become an outlaw, Snake plans to retaliate by stealing the US Constitution. Well, I won't lie, that doesn't sound like a great premise. Regardless, I do think the comics were a weird but interesting way to try and fill in the gaps between the films, while also keeping the franchise alive in some form or another for 20 years. But that doesn't mean that there weren't failed projects during this span of time as well. There was an Escape from New York TV show that was never picked up by networks, a cancelled anime, a supposed follow-up to LA titled Escape from Earth that never came to fruition, and the most interesting of them, a cancelled video game that footage actually exists of. Now I remember seeing this footage of the cancelled Escape video game, and while it looked pretty cool, it also looked very familiar because I've played this game. It's called Dead to Rights. So I don't know if Dead to Rights was originally a Snake Plissken game that got revamped into a renegade cop game, or if it just served as a template for what a potential Snake Plissken game would look like. And on a side note, Dead to Rights is an awesome game, so I'm pretty bummed we didn't get to see a Snake Plissken Tecmo affair, because it probably would have been pretty damn good. But the anime and the video game both unfortunately had to be cancelled after the passing of franchise producer Deborah Hill in 2005. And even though Snake Plissken never got his own video game, yes, you know where I'm going with this, we all know he lives on in spirit through video game history.
Kept you waiting, huh?
To video game fans, especially PS1 and 2 generation gamers, the plot of a one-man secret stealth infiltration mission to stop a cadre of insane, bizarre terrorists sounds familiar. And it should, because not only was Escape from New York's story a clear inspiration to the plot for Metal Gear Solid, Escape also gave inspirational birth to one of the greatest characters in video game history, Solid Snake. The homage was truly paid in Metal Gear Solid 2, with Solid donning the pseudonym Iroquois Plissken, which Iroquois translated means snake, so Snake Plissken.
My name is Plissken. Iroquois Plissken, Lieutenant Junior Grade.
MGS3 would add the inspiration icing on the cake when you finally get to play as the eye patch wearing big boss who is all but a spitting image of Snake Plissken. There are some other similarities between the Escape movies and Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2, and if you're interested in those, check out the segment Solid Satire from the Metal Gear Solid 2 as a Masterpiece video. It is wild to think in the modern day of copyright striking that Kojima wasn't sued for ripping off the plot to Escape from New York, and when Carpenter was asked why he didn't pursue legal action, he said, because Kojima was nice to him when they met. See, boys and girls, being nice does pay off. Nowadays though, most people under the age of 30 are probably more aware of Solid Snake than they are of Snake Plissken, but it's always important to pay tribute to inspirations. So, from Metal Gear Solid fans, I say thank you John Carpenter for Escape from New York, for creating a badass character like Snake Plissken, and for being willing to let others reimagine the world you created. Without your generous creative spirit, one of the greatest gaming franchises of all time may not have taken place. Well, I think this seems like a good place for us to wrap up because we've talked everything Escape franchise there is. So far. Because apparently the franchise is being revived with a new film that's currently in the works. I've read it's supposed to be a continuation of New York rather than a remake, but I've also read that John Carpenter isn't involved at all, so I'm a bit torn. Like all things though, only time will tell, but it would be awesome to see a new adventure of Snake Plissken if it is done properly. Thank you guys for joining me today though. Your time, support, and feedback are always appreciated here. It's been a lot of fun to run down all the weird and obscure things I've found out about the Escape franchise over the past few years, and whether you've seen the movies or not, I hope this video has intrigued you to check out or revisit the Escape Mediaverse. Make sure to like and subscribe and engage with this content so the algo knows that you like it, and let me know in the comments what your thoughts are on the Escape franchise, or if you've experienced any of its other forms of content. I've been your host Sparse, here at Ascended Pixels. saying stay steezy, gang, and I'll see you on the next.
President of what? You're the president of jack shit.